it's no secret by this point that Piccolo is my favorite character in Dragon Ball.
Wow, what a shock!
And in the Android / Cell Saga, he actually became one of the fighters that everyone had to rely on for a certain time. After the 3 years of training with Goku and Gohan to prepare for the androids, Piccolo gained a substantial power increase to completely stomp Dr. Gero, and possibly even rivaling the power of Super Saiyan Vegeta. Well, more on that later. And it's also no secret that Piccolo vs Android 17 is still one of the best fights in the series, even to this day. Now, setting aside who would have won that fight, for which I'll do a separate video covering that as well, today I want to talk about who would win in a fight between Super Namekian Piccolo and not just Android 17, but 18 and even 16 as well. However, I want to talk about two separate versions of this fight. First, I want to discuss how Piccolo would have done against 17 and 18 in Trunks' future timeline had he fused with Kami. And then I'll discuss how Piccolo would have done in the Cell games against all three of 16, 17, and 18. So in Trunks' timeline, we can assume that he hadn't fused with Kami, or at least there's no mention of him doing so. So if that's the case, we saw how that went. I mean, Piccolo was easily beaten by Android 18. Now, from what I can gather, there was about a 6-month time span after Goku died to the heart virus that Androids 17 and 18 showed up to challenge Z Fighters. This is important because if that's the case, Piccolo would not have the 3 years of training that he had with Goku and Gohan in the present timeline. So even with him fusing with Kami, there's a chance that he still would not have had the strength necessary to beat the androids. And in the present timeline, Piccolo being fused with Kami on top of the 3 years of training was still fighting on the same level as Android 17, and was implied that the two of them were neck and neck in terms of raw power and strength. Now, having said that, it's also important to note that after fighting 17 and 18 in the present timeline, Trunks tells the Z Fighters that the androids in the present timeline are stronger than the ones in the future, even going so far as to say that Trunks and the androids were, for the most part, evenly matched. Now, it's tough to say if Piccolo would still be stronger than that Trunks as a Super Saiyan, even with being fused with Kami, but minus the 3 extra years of training. But given what we see in the present timeline and how much ground Piccolo was able to cover in that time, I think it's safer to assume that Piccolo would be on the same level as Trunks at the time of the android's first appearance in the present timeline at best. Meaning, at best, he would be evenly matched with the androids respectively. And with that in mind, it might just end up being the same kind of fight as it was in the original Piccolo vs 17 fight if it was a 1v1. If Piccolo were to fight either 17 or 18 in the 1v1, Piccolo would perform decent enough and maybe even land a strong enough light grenade or something similar and end the fight. But with the infinite stamina of the androids and the strength decrease about having training prior, it would look more and more on the android side, albeit high difficulty. And by extension, if Piccolo were to fight both 17 and 18 in the 2v1, it would fare even worse for Piccolo. Granted, he'd give both of them some trouble, but they ultimately would be eventually able to corner him and take the win, similar to how they did with Super Saiyan Gohan in the future. And just to make sure I cover it, this will likely be the same thing if both 17 and 18 fought Super Namekian Piccolo in the present timeline. Like, Piccolo was already fighting 50-50 with 17, and that was with Piccolo getting worn down. 17 and 18 together would likely be able to eventually overwhelm him and take him down. Again, though, very high difficulty. I still think if Piccolo managed to land a full power light grenade on the two of them, he'd at the very least be able to turn the tides of battle in his favor. And if it's at the very least a high difficulty for Piccolo in a 2v1, it'll definitely be worse if 16 steps into the picture. Now, I know someone is bound to say in the comments, but for right now, let's just skip the semantics about 16 more than likely not wanting to fight Piccolo. I know that in character this wouldn't happen. 16 is much more of a pacifist and only really wants to fight Goku. And even then, I don't think it's necessarily a want for 16 more than though he has to, as he's programmed to do so. But if we say for the sake of conversation and say that 16 steps in to help fight Piccolo, it should be obvious that Piccolo would lose. Now, for the sake of the video, if y'all want me to talk about my thoughts on if Piccolo were to fight 16 in just a 1v1, I think it might be more or less on the same level as when Piccolo fought Imperfect Cell, with the thousands of humans absorbed. Now, we'll say this, and this might just be me being a Piccolo tard, but I personally think Piccolo might have done better against Cell if he had been in tip-top shape. Granted, the anime prolongs the fight between 17 and Piccolo, and in the manga is not quite as extensive, but even for a manga fight, it's a pretty decent length of time. By the time Cell showed up to absorb 17, Piccolo had thrown out several attacks and took quite a bit of hits that left him in a pretty worn out state by the time he had to fight Cell. But if I'm being honest, maybe that wouldn't matter, as 17, who is basically on the same level as Piccolo in terms of power and who can't run out of that energy and can't get worn down, at least in terms of stamina, was getting curb stomped by Cell, who 16 went on to more or less evenly match. As much as a light grenade stand as I am seeming in this video, I will say that a light grenade at tip-top shape and at full power might be his best chance. It might actually get the job done, but that's about it. Personally, I think Piccolo is a better fighter, but with 16's power plus him being able to fight a prolonged battles without getting tired, he just kind of holds the edge over Piccolo. Now, fast forward to the Cell games, and we got an interesting fight on our hands. After coming out of the hyperbolic time chamber, Piccolo is at bare minimum stronger than semi-perfect Cell, and likely stronger than Super Vegeta that fought semi-perfect Cell. Now, even though we don't get any feats from Piccolo in both the anime or manga, we do have his fights with the Cell Juniors to go off of. Now, for one thing, it's never officially stated how strong the Cell Juniors were, but majority of the fandom have agreed, or at least come to the conclusion, that they were at least relative to normal Perfect Cell, which makes sense as they were fighting and beating Super Saiyan Grade 2 Trunks and Vegeta. And even with this, despite Cell saying that he didn't care if he killed them, at least in the manga, it's pretty evident that the Cell Juniors were holding back to some degree. Now in the manga, it's only implied that Piccolo was fighting on par with Trunks and Vegeta, in the manga chapter where Gohan explodes into Super Saiyan 2. All the Z fighters, including a worn out post-fight Goku, are on the ground except for Trunks, Vegeta, and Piccolo. In the anime though, Piccolo is absolutely going to work on the Cell Juniors and is actually able to get a good few good hits on multiple of them. So with the Cell Junior scaling, the implications from the manga, and the feats from the anime, we can assume that Piccolo is at best just below Trunks and Vegeta in terms of raw power. Now when it comes to the androids, their power pretty much stops at semi-perfect Cell, as 16, who is the strongest of the trio, couldn't even damage Cell in the slightest after he absorbed 17. So given that Piccolo is undoubtedly stronger than each one of androids 16, 17, and 18 individually, and given what we see that Piccolo has the capability of fighting multiple opponents at once, I think Piccolo has the advantage here. Now, in the androids' defense, they aren't as playful as the Cell Juniors and will more than likely be fighting a lot smarter and a lot more cautiously, especially Android 16. But Piccolo is just as cautious and likely is a smarter fighter than the androids, with the exception of possibly 16. So I think that Piccolo will have a better chance of outmaneuvering the androids and taking them down one by one. He might even be able to beat them using the multiform technique, even with that technique dividing his strength. The only way I think the androids definitively win this is if any one of them were to use their self-destruct bomb that they have in their body. Not too sure how strong the blast is supposed to be, but 16 was convinced to be strong enough to kill Perfect Cell, so if we say that's true, then it might blow Piccolo to bits, like enough to where he can't regenerate from. But again, like I keep saying, one light grenade from Piccolo and he might be able to just one-shot all of them, especially if they're near each other. So yeah, overall, I think Piccolo wins this one. If I had to give a 1 to 10, I'd say probably like a 7 or 8. Some people might be thinking I'm lowballing Piccolo with that because Piccolo is ridiculous by the time of the Cell Saga. So I don't know, but either way, I think Piccolo does win this one. I think it's very high diff, and yeah, so there's the video. Hope you all enjoy. Let me know in the comments what you think, but let me know in the comments if there's any other Dragon Ball Burst Battle videos y'all want me to do. Just if you like today's content, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click the bell for more notifications. Till my next one, Lightning Snow out.